The anarcho prefix in anarco-capitalism refers to anarchism. There is much debate over what the defining elements of anarchism are, but virtually all conceptions entail a society without a state, though not necessarily without a government more broadly conceived. The state is that institution in a given geographical area which asserts a monopoly over the creation, interpretation, and enforcement of law. The laws it formulates supersede those rules made by any person or organization that resides under its jurisdiction. The state is the ultimate arbiter in all cases of interpersonal conflict, including those involving its own agents. The conflict of interest should be apparent. Lastly, it reserves the unique legal privilege to lay taxes, i.e., to coercively demand payment for its so-called services, and to unilaterally determine and alter the levels thereof. The aforementioned characteristics are inherent to all states, no matter their particular type or configuration. The capitalism suffix indicates that the anarchic society specified is that of a free market capitalist variety. Under anarcho-capitalism, all scarce goods, to include land and other means of production, are subject to private ownership. Since capitalism simply refers to that economic environment where the means of production are privately owned, this system is considered capitalist by default. It is, however, important to note that private ownership of a good does not necessarily mean it is owned by a single individual. Two or more people may be partial private owners of a scarce good, e.g. corporations, co-ops, partnerships, etc. To privately own something simply means having an exclusive right to utilize, occupy, or employ it, whereas there exist non-owners who have no such right. A right simply refers to that which one may justifiably employ force to defend or seek retribution for its violation. The problem of social order arises when two or more people want to use the same good in incompatible ways. Goods which have the capacity for mutually exclusive usage, and whose demand exceeds their availability, are said to be scarce. It is due to such scarcity and the desire to avoid violent interpersonal conflict that property norms are developed. In addition to helping avoid conflict, such property norms serve as the legal basis for adjudicating interpersonal disputes. That is, for determining who the victims and perpetrators are in any given violent conflict, and what measures should be taken to most approximately restore the victim and penalize the aggressor. From this, one may conclude the purpose of any political philosophy is to resolve the fundamental problem of social order through the development of property norms. Fundamentally, the scope of political philosophy is confined to one simple question: when is the use of force justified? As noted earlier, force is only justified in response to rights violations, and one's rights are determined by prevailing property norms. In essence, to determine when the use of force is justified and who the victim and aggressor are in any given conflict, one must discover who owns what. The property norm which serves as the core of anarcho-capitalism is the private property ethic. As alluded to earlier, this ethic states that all scarce goods, including land and other means of production, are subject to private ownership, given they are acquired via original appropriation or voluntary exchange. Original appropriation, also known as homesteading, states that the first user and claimant of a previously unowned good is that good's rightful owner. Physical possession, transformation, and embroiderment are examples of homesteading acts. It should be noted that creation has nothing to do with establishing ownership, as nothing is truly created nor destroyed, but merely transformed. Since this method of property acquisition awards ownership to the first user, it is by definition conflict-free. Voluntary exchange is the second just means of property ownership. This entails that one came to own something via its prior owner voluntarily or contractually transferring title to him. Being voluntary, this method is likewise free of conflict. Of course, alternative property norms do exist, yet none fulfill the purpose of action norms as completely as the private property ethic. From the private property ethic, one may deduce both the non-aggression principle, or otherwise known as the NAP, and the principle of self-ownership. The non-aggression principle condemns all acts of aggression as unjustified and criminal, i.e., of violating property rights. Aggression in this context is defined as the uninvited initiation of physical interference with the persons or property of others, or threats thereof. The principle of self-ownership stipulates that one is and can only be the sole owner of his own physical body. This brings up an important nuance in the anarcho-capitalist conception of private property. Fundamentally, property rights over a given good are accorded to those who can demonstrate a superior objective link to them. Special consideration must be made in regards to one's own physical body, as such a link is demonstrated by his uniquely direct control over it. That is to say, one may control or manipulate his body by will alone. For this reason, one is exempt from having to establish a property right over his own physical body through homesteading or voluntary exchange. Conversely, one may control external goods only indirectly. One cannot control or manipulate external goods by will alone, but instead must employ the medium of his own body or some other good. Hence, the need for one to establish a superior objective link between himself and external goods through original appropriation or voluntary exchange if he is to be recognized as their legitimate owner. If the state is charged with protecting the property of its citizenry, then it must be categorically stated that any attempt to do so can only end in contradiction. As stated earlier, an inherent characteristic of any state is that it must lay taxes in order to fund its operations. If one does not pay taxes, then he will have his person or property aggressed against. First, he may face fines, then prison, and possibly death if he resists arrest. Simply stated, taxation is theft. Thus, the state cannot make any attempts to protect the property of its citizenry without first violating it on a mass scale. Another issue involved with taxation is that it manifests the economic calculation problem. Since the state's revenue comes from theft, as opposed to voluntary patronage, it cannot determine the most economic ways to employ its services, ways which would otherwise be indicated by tracking profits and losses. The state is invariably in a position where it must make arbitrary decisions regarding what products or services to offer, where to offer them, how to produce them, how much to produce, what materials to produce them with, etc. Of course, this problem becomes even more disturbing when one reflects on the fact that had such resources not been wasted on status objectives, they could have otherwise been allocated towards productive market ends. Of course, some will attempt to justify the state's existence by claiming society is bound by a social contract, that for the same reason a restaurant owner can expect payment from a customer after he enjoys a meal, so too can the state expect payment for the services it renders. However, this is a faulty analogy for two reasons. First, the state must commence in mass theft before it can provide anything. It would be more analogous to say the restaurant owner stole your money up front, but is willing to offer a consolation prize of some food. In reality, one makes an individual choice to go to a restaurant and is only serviced upon his specific request. This is in distinct contrast with the state, which offers a slew of unrequested services, some of which one may not even enjoy, and then expects payment in full. Second, the restaurant owner presumably acquired his restaurant via original appropriation or voluntary exchange. As such, he is the legitimate owner of the goods and services he provides, and is accordingly in a proper position to expect payment from his willing customers. In contrast, the state did not acquire the property it asserts jurisdiction over through such just means. From this, one may conclude the state is little more than a glorified crime syndicate. In an anarcho-capitalist society, anyone can live in any way they see fit, so long as they do not commit aggression as previously defined. If they would like to voluntarily pool their property with others to form mutualist enclaves or socialist communes, then such is their prerogative. The greatest variety of lifestyles are permitted under an overarching anarcho-capitalist legal system. Anarcho-capitalism is not a utopian philosophy. No claim that crime or hardship will be eliminated is being made. Rather, what is being asserted is that an anarcho-capitalist legal system is superior to all others for the ends of promoting peace, cooperation, and economic prosperity. That in this truly free market environment, the self-interest of individuals are harmoniously aligned with the welfare of greater society.